The applause was deafening, but all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. I stood in the deep shadows of the ballroom, my body hidden by a massive marble pillar. I was wearing an itchy, oversized gray uniform that hung off my frame like a sack. In my hands, I balanced a heavy silver tray filled with empty champagne flutes, their crystal stems clinking together as my hands shook. On stage, my sister, Fallen, stood under a golden spotlight. She dabbed a fake tear from her eye with a silk handkerchief. "I built Larkin Beauty from nothing," she lied into the microphone, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. She clutched the Businesswoman of the Year trophy to her chest. "It was just me, a tiny dorm room and a dream. I worked until my fingers bled to create these formulas." The crowd went wild, standing up to cheer for the self-made queen of skincare. I gripped the edges of the silver tray until my knuckles turned white and my fingernails dug into my palms. It was a dorm room, all right, but it was mine. 5 years ago, I was the one surrounded by beakers and journals. I was the one who discovered the peptide bond that made her a billionaire. She had paid me back by framing me for embezzlement, using her charm to turn our parents against me, and sending me to prison for 2 years. While I was behind bars, she stole my identity and my life's work. As Fallen walked off stage, high on the adoration of the elite, she bumped into me near the service exit. She didn't recognize me. Why would she? My hair was dyed a dull, flat black, and thick, ugly glasses obscured my face. I looked like a ghost. She smiled cruelly, wiped her bright red, lipstick-stained mouth with a cocktail napkin, and dropped the crumpled paper onto my tray. "Trash," she whispered, not even looking me in the eye as she smoothed her silk gown. "Take it away, and try not to stand so close to the guests. You smell like the kitchen." My name is Marlowe, and that was the moment I decided. I wasn't just going to clean her house, I was going to clean her out. I knew Fallen was desperate for a new live-in housekeeper. She was famous in the domestic agencies for being a nightmare. She had fired the last 3 maids in a single month for breathing too loud or walking with heavy feet. She wanted someone invisible, someone silent, and someone she could look down on. I applied under the name Jane. I arrived at the penthouse, the one bought with the money from the patents she stole from me, wearing shapeless, baggy clothes and no makeup. I made sure my skin looked sallow and my posture was slumped. Fallen didn't even look up from her gold-plated iPhone during the interview. She was lounging on a white velvet sofa that cost more than my college tuition. "Do you speak English?" she snapped, her eyes scanning a celebrity gossip blog. "Yes, madam," I said, pitching my voice an octave lower and adding a slight, nervous tremor to my tone. "I am very quiet. I clean. I cook. I disappear. I have no family and no friends. My work is my life." Holly's, our mother and Fallen's brand manager, walked into the room. She looked me up and down with a sneer. Holly's had been the one to testify against me in court, claiming she saw me stealing the company funds. She hadn't looked at me since the day I was handcuffed. Now she looked right through me. "She's ugly enough," Holly's said to Fallen, as if I were a piece of furniture. "At least Stellan won't be tempted to look at her. We don't need another scandal with the help." "True," Fallen yawned. "Fine, you're hired, Jane. My bedroom needs to be scrubbed twice a day. If I find a single hair on the floor, you're back on the street. Go find the service stairs." I bowed my head. "Thank you, madam." As I walked toward the back of the house, I felt a cold thrill. I was now the invisible ghost in the machine I had built. They had invited the fox into the henhouse, and they didn't even know it. My first task was organizing the lab. It was a climate-controlled room in the center of the penthouse, where Fallen filmed her "Get ready with me" videos. She liked to pretend she was still mixing formulas for her social media followers to maintain the image of the scientist founder. In reality, the room was filled with expensive glass vats and pre-made bases sent from the factory. I saw the giant containers of the upcoming Velvet Glow moisturizer. This was the product that was supposed to take the company to its initial public offering. I knew the chemistry of that cream by heart. I had invented the base during my sophomore year. I knew exactly how delicate the balance was. I knew that if you added just 3 drops of common white vinegar to a gallon-sized vat, It wouldn't spoil the cream or change the color. It wouldn't even irritate the skin. But the chemical reaction would slowly destabilize the pH balance over 48 hours. It would feel perfectly fine when first applied. And then, 10 minutes later, as it reacted with the natural heat of human skin, it would begin to smell faintly of sulfur and wet dog. I pulled a small dropper from my apron pocket while dusting the high shelves. I made sure the security camera was blocked by my ladder. Drip, drip, drip. Perfect, I whispered, watching the clear liquid disappear into the thick white cream. I spent the rest of the afternoon polishing the glass until it shone. Fallon walked in later that evening with a camera crew. She didn't even acknowledge my presence as I moved to the corner with my feather duster. She began her recording, dipping a gold spatula into the vat I had just sabotaged. "This is the secret to my soul," she told the camera, smearing the tainted cream on her wrist. "It's pure, it's fresh, and it's all me." I stayed in the shadows, holding my breath. The countdown had started. Hollies came over for a strategy lunch the next day. I served them kale salads and poached salmon on the terrace. They spoke as if I were a statue, or perhaps a dog waiting for scraps. It was amazing how quickly people forgot you were human when you wore a uniform. "The pre-orders for Velvet Glow are insane," Hollies gloated, stabbing a piece of kale. "The investors are salivating. We need to make sure we scrub any mention of Marlowe from the old university archives before the IPO papers are filed. We can't have any disgraced sister stories leaking out." Fallon laughed, a sharp, metallic sound. "Marlowe is probably scrubbing toilets in a halfway house right now, or she's in a shelter. She's too weak to fight back, Mother. She always was. She had the brains, but I have the spine. I did her a favor, really. She couldn't have handled this level of fame." I poured sparkling water into Hollies' glass, my hand steady even as my blood boiled. I visualized the water was acid. I wanted to scream that I was right there, that the weak sister was the one holding their lunch. "More ice, Jane," Hollies barked, snapping her fingers at me without looking up. "And make sure it's the filtered alkaline cubes, not that tap water garbage. Fallon's skin is sensitive." "Yes, madam," I said softly. I went to the kitchen and grabbed the ice cubes I had specially prepared the night before using unfiltered tap water from the basement utility sink. It was a tiny, petty act of defiance, but it was just the beginning. I was warming up the engine of their destruction. As I returned to the terrace, I watched Fallon rub her arms. She had applied the Velvet Glow earlier that morning. The sun was hitting her skin, warming the cream. I saw her nose wrinkle slightly. She sniffed the air, looking confused. "Do you smell something?" she asked Hollies. "Just the jasmine from the garden, dear," Hollies replied. I turned away to hide the flash of victory in my eyes. The wet dog was starting to wake up. 2 days later, the penthouse was filled with the sound of glass breaking. I was in the foyer, polishing the gold trim on the front door, when Fallon came charging out of her bedroom. She was wrapped in a silk robe, her hair in a messy bun, and she was screaming at the top of her lungs. "Jane, get in here." I hurried into her dressing room. Fallon was standing in front of her three-way mirror, sniffing her own arm with a look of pure horror. "I smell disgusting," she shrieked, her voice hitting a high, panicked note. "I took 3 showers this morning, but every time I put on my signature cream, I smell like a kennel, like a wet dog in a dumpster." Hollies was there too, looking at the open jar of Velvet Glow on the vanity. "It's probably just a bad batch of the fragrance oil, Fallon. Calm down." "Calm down. I have a meeting with the Vogue editors in 2 hours. Fallon stormed over to me, her eyes wild. "Jane, did you use a dirty towel on me? Did you wash my robes with a moldy rag?" I dropped to my knees, feigning absolute terror. I let my lower lip tremble. "No, madam, I swear." "I used the premium lavender detergent you ordered. I bleached every towel twice." "Then it's the factory," Fallon screamed. She grabbed her phone and dialed her VP of production. "Listen to me, you idiot. The entire Velvet Glow run is tainted. It smells like a swamp. Cancel the shipment. Fire the Italian supplier. I don't care if it costs $1 million in penalties, get it out of my sight. She slammed the phone down and threw a crystal perfume bottle at the wall. It shattered, filling the room with a scent that struggled to mask the faint, sharp tang of sulfur. I bowed my head and started picking up the glass shards. I made sure to move slowly, keeping my face down so they wouldn't see the smirk I couldn't quite hide. $1 million gone in a single phone call. And the best part? The factory was perfectly fine. It was her own lab that was the problem. Stellan, Fallen's husband, was a man who seemed more like a piece of jewelry than a partner. He was handsome, came from an old money family, and had the kind of connections Fallen craved. But unlike my sister and mother, Stellan was actually kind. He was the only person in that house who treated Jane like a human being. I was scrubbing the marble floor of the foyer late one evening when Stellan came home. He looked exhausted. He stopped and looked at me, a small, sad smile on his face. "Still working, Jane?" he asked, setting his briefcase down. "It's nearly 10 o'clock. You should go to bed." "The madam wants the floors to reflect the chandelier light, sir," I replied, keeping my eyes on the soapy water. "She's had a very rough day," he apologized, sounding like he'd said those words 1,000 times before. "The company is facing some setbacks. She takes it out on everyone around her. I'm sorry if she was cruel to you." I looked up and noticed he was carrying a heavy textbook on chemical engineering. It seemed he was trying to understand the technical side of his wife's business, likely to help her through the recent factory crisis. "It's an interesting book, sir," I said softly, "especially the chapter on how peptides bond under extreme heat. If the temperature isn't perfect, the whole structure collapses." Stellan froze. He looked at me, his eyes wide with startle. "You know about peptide bonding?" I realized I had stepped out of character. I quickly lowered my head and started scrubbing harder. "I watch a lot of public television, sir, the Science Channel. It helps me sleep." Stellan looked at me for a long beat, his expression suspicious and curious. "Public television, right? Well, get some rest, Jane." As he walked away, I cursed my own pride. I wanted to be known. I wanted someone to recognize the brain they had all tried to bury, but I had to stay invisible. If Stellan started asking questions, my plan would fall apart before the real damage was done. Fallen lived and died by her digital calendar. It was synced to her phone, her tablet, and the giant smart screen in the kitchen. She prided herself on being hyper-efficient. Because I was the one who cleaned the kitchen, I had plenty of time alone with that smart screen. I had spent my time in prison learning more than just how to survive. I had learned how to code from a fellow inmate who was a former hacker. I knew how to get into the household Wi-Fi, and from there, it was a simple matter of accessing the smart home hub. I didn't delete her most important meeting of the month. That would be too obvious. Instead, I simply moved it. Mr. Thayer was the city's most powerful venture capitalist. If he invested, Larkin Beauty would be bulletproof. His meeting was set for Friday at 11:00 a.m. I went into the system and changed it to 10:00 a.m. Then I went into Fallen's personal phone, which she left on the charger in the kitchen every morning, and silenced the specific notification for that calendar entry. On Friday morning, Fallen was lounging in the breakfast nook at 9:45 a.m. She was wearing a heavy green mud mask and a tattered bathrobe, sipping a smoothie. She thought she had over an hour to get ready. The doorbell rang at exactly 10:00 a.m. I opened the door to find Mr. Thayer, a man known for his punctuality and his hatred of unprofessionalism. "I'm here for the 10 o'clock, he said stiffly. I led him into the living room. "The madam is preparing for you, sir." Fallen came running into the room, hearing the voices. She didn't have time to wash her face. She stood there, her skin covered in cracking green mud, her hair a bird's nest, staring at the most important investor in the country. "Mr. Thayer," she gasped, You're early." "I am exactly on time, Fallen," he said, looking at her with pure unimpressed judgment. "My time is valuable. I see you've forgotten our appointment." The meeting was a disaster. Fallen spent the whole time trying to scrub her face with a napkin while Thayer lectured her on brand discipline. He left after 15 minutes. Fallen blamed a glitch in the software, but the damage was done. Thayer didn't invest. The best way to break someone like Fallen isn't to hit them with a big blow. It's to poke them with 1,000 tiny needles. I started a campaign of what the guards in prison called the ghost walk. I started moving her things, just slightly. I would take her car keys from the silver bowl where she always left them and place them on the far end of the kitchen counter. I would take her favorite Lucky lipstick from her purse and put it in the back of the vegetable drawer in the fridge. One morning, she spent 40 minutes screaming at me because she couldn't find her iPad. I had tucked it behind the cushions of the sofa she never sat on. When I found it for her, she looked at me like I was the crazy one. "I swear I looked there," she yelled, her eyes bloodshot. "Jane, are you moving my things?" "No, madam," I said with a blank, dull expression. "I only touch what I am cleaning." Then I moved to the thermostat. Fallen was obsessed with the temperature. She liked it at exactly 68 degrees. I would turn it up to 72 while she was sleeping, then down to 64 right before she woke up. She began to unravel. She started accusing the other staff, the part-time chef and the driver, of stealing from her or playing pranks. She fired the driver on Tuesday. She threw a plate of eggs at the chef on Wednesday. "You're just stressed, darling," Hollies told her during a visit. "You're losing your grip, just like your father did before he had his breakdown. You need to focus on the IPO." "I'm not losing my grip," Fallen shrieked. "The house is haunted, or everyone is out to get me." Gaslighting is a terrible, soul-destroying weapon. They had used it on me for years to make me believe I was a criminal and a failure. Now, I was giving it back to them, one misplaced key and 1 degree at a time. Even while I was breaking her mind, I had a primary goal: evidence. I needed the proof that would stand up in a court of law, not just the court of public opinion. I knew Fallen kept a legacy safe in the library. It was hidden behind a row of fake books. I had watched her open it from the hallway while I was vacuuming. The code was 0612, her own birthday. She was always so predictable. One night, while Fallen and Stellan were out at a theater premiere, I opened the safe. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my teeth. Inside, among the gold bars and the property deeds, I found it. It was a black, leather-bound journal. The edges were worn and the pages were yellowed. I opened it and saw my own handwriting. This was my college journal, the one that contained the original handwritten formulas for the Larkin Lift serum. It even had my coffee stains on the margins and a doodle of a phoenix I had drawn in the corner of page 40. This was the smoking gun. It proved the formulas existed years before Larkin Beauty was even a thought in Fallen's head. I didn't steal it. If I took it, she would notice it was gone and call the police, and I'd be back in a cell before I could use it. No, I had a better plan. I moved the journal to the one place in the entire 5,000-square-foot penthouse that Fallen would never, ever go: the cleaning supply closet in the laundry room. I tucked it into a box of industrial-strength microfiber cloths, right behind the gallon jugs of bleach. In Fallen's world, the cleaning closet was a black hole. It didn't exist. It was the help's territory. The evidence was now safe, waiting for the moment I was ready to show the world the truth. I closed the safe and buffed the fingerprints off the keypad. The trap was fully set. Fallen was invited to the Met Gala, the most important night in the fashion and beauty world. She had commissioned a custom silk gown that cost more than a mid-sized house. It was a deep, shimmering violet, the color of royalty. When the dress arrived at the penthouse, Fallen insisted that only Jane be allowed to steam it. She didn't trust the dry cleaners. "If you ruin this, Jane, I will make sure you never work in this city again," she threatened, poking me in the shoulder with a manicured finger. I took the dress to the laundry room. As I moved the heavy steamer over the delicate silk, I looked at the construction of the gown. It was a masterpiece, but it had a weakness. The heavy skirt was attached to the bodice by a series of reinforced silk threads. I pulled a small pair of embroidery scissors from my pocket. I didn't cut the threads. Instead, I carefully picked at the reinforcement stitching around the waist and the hemline. I replaced the strong, industrial thread with a very thin, dissolving, basting thread I had brought from the craft store. It looked perfect to the naked eye. It would hold for a few hours of standing and walking, but I knew Fallen's habits. She was a fast, aggressive walker, and she always stepped on her own hem when she climbed stairs. I watched the live stream of the gala from the kitchen that night. Fallen looked stunning as she stepped onto the red carpet. She was posing for the cameras, basking in the flashes. Then she started to climb the famous stone steps. She moved too fast. Her heel caught the inner hem. I saw the fabric strain. Then, with a sickening rip that was caught by a nearby microphone, the entire bottom half of the skirt detached. Fallen was left standing in front of the world's press in just her bodice and her skin-colored shapewear. She let out a scream of pure humiliation and tried to cover herself, but it was too late. The photos were already on the internet. I sat at the kitchen table, eating a bowl of buttered popcorn, and watched the Queen of Beauty flee the red carpet in tears. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Fallen came home 2 hours later, drunk and absolutely furious. She had skipped the after-parties and come straight back to scream. Holly's was with her, trying to manage the PR disaster on her phone. "The memes are already everywhere," Fallen shrieked, throwing her silver clutch at the wall. "I'm the laughingstock of the industry. They're calling it the Larkin leak." I was in the living room, quietly polishing the silver tea set, acting as if I were part of the shadows. I had my phone in my apron pocket, the voice memo app already running. "I don't care about the humiliation," Fallen screamed at Holly's. She grabbed a bottle of vodka from the bar and poured a glass. "I care about the stock price. The investors are already calling. If the public thinks the face of the brand is a joke, they'll start looking closer at the company." Holly's sighed, sounding exhausted. "We just need to focus on the Eclipse launch. That's the product that will make everyone forget the dress." "It better," Fallen ranted. "Because if people find out I didn't even write those formulas, I'm dead, mother. I can't even explain how the Larkin lift works to a reporter without a script. Marlowe is the actual genius, and I'm just the face. Why can't the face have a dress that stays on?" She leaned against the bar, sobbing into her drink. "I hate her. Even when she's in the dirt, her stupid brain is the only thing keeping me afloat." Click, I stopped the recording. I saved the file as confession, MP3, and uploaded it to 3 different cloud drives. I had it. In her own voice, she had admitted the truth. She had admitted that I was the genius and she was the fraud. "Jane Morice," Fallen yelled. "Yes, madam," I said, stepping out of the shadows. I was smiling, but in the dark, she couldn't see my teeth. With the Met Gala disaster fresh in the news, Fallen was under immense pressure to make the next product launch, Pure Pearl, a massive hit. She was the one testing the final samples on her own skin for the day in the life promo videos. I knew the Pure Pearl formula used a very high-grade encapsulated retinol. It was powerful but gentle. I went into the lab on Tuesday night. I had bought a $5 jar of cheap, industrial-grade abrasive cream from an online chemical supply house. It was a crude, synthetic version of retinol that was banned in most cosmetic products because it was far too harsh for human skin. I emptied the Pure Pearl sample jar and filled it with the cheap, abrasive goop. It looked the same and felt the same, but it was essentially liquid sandpaper. Fallen used the jar that night before bed. The next morning, the penthouse was filled with a sound that was more of a wail than a scream. I hurried to the master suite. Fallen was standing in front of the mirror, her hands hovering over her face. Her skin was a bright, angry red. It was peeling in large, flaky patches, and tiny white blisters were forming around her cheeks. She looked like she had a 2nd-degree sunburn. "My face," she wailed. "What is happening to me? I have a television interview in 4 hours." Holly's arrived 10 minutes later, looking panicked. "It's just stress dermatitis, Fallen. Your body is reacting to the gala scandal. We have to cover it." "With what?" Fallen cried. "It hurts to touch." Layer the heavy HD foundation over it, Holly's commanded. We'll use the green color corrector. You have to go on TV. If you cancel now, the rumors of a breakdown will be confirmed. They spent 2 hours layering thick, heavy makeup over the chemical burn. I watched from the doorway as the foundation began to bubble and crack over the blisters. Fallen looked like a melting wax statue. By the time she reached the TV studio, the makeup was sliding off her face in clumps. The Queen of Beauty looked like a horror movie monster. I was getting bolder, and that led to my first real mistake. I had been reading my old university alumni newsletter in my small room in the servants' quarters. It was a way to feel connected to the life I used to have. I had circled a small article about my old research professor, and my real name, Marlo Larkin, was printed in bold letters next to it. I must have fallen asleep with the newsletter on the bed. When I woke up, I realized I had left the door slightly ajar. Stellan had entered the servants' wing to look for a spare set of gym towels, since Fallen had fired the laundry girl the day before. I walked into the kitchen to find Stellan standing by the counter. He was holding the newsletter. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking. "Jane," he said. His voice wasn't angry, it was terrified. "Why do you have a newsletter from the University of Chemical Sciences, from the same year Fallen graduated?" I froze. I considered lying, but I saw the way he was looking at the photo of me in the newsletter. Even with the dyed hair and glasses, the resemblance was too strong to deny anymore. Stellan wasn't as blind as his wife. I took a deep breath. I stood up straight, pulling my shoulders back. I reached up and took off the thick, fake glasses. I looked him right in the eye. "Because I graduated with her, Stellan," I said. I dropped the lower, gravelly Jane voice and spoke in my true tone. "In fact, I graduated first in our class. She graduated last only because I wrote her senior thesis for her." Stellan gasped, stumbling back against the refrigerator. "Marlo, you're the sister, the one they said was a thief, the one who was in prison." "I was in prison because Fallen and Holly's put me there," I said, my voice cold and steady. "They stole my life, Stellan, and now I'm back to take it back." I expected Stellan to call the police. I expected him to scream for Fallen. Instead, he slumped into a kitchen chair and buried his face in his hands. He stayed like that for a long time, the only sound in the room being the hum of the expensive refrigerator. "I knew it," he whispered, his voice muffled. "Deep down, I think I always knew." He looked up at me, his eyes red. "She talks in her sleep, Marlo. She has nightmares. She says she's sorry to you, and then she laughs about how easy it was to trick the judge. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. I wanted to believe in her." He looked around the gold-trimmed kitchen with a look of pure disgust. "She's a monster. She treats me like an accessory for her brand. She's bankrupting our joint accounts to pay for these lawsuits against her former employees. She doesn't love me. She doesn't love anyone." He looked at me, really seeing me for the first time. "You've been living in that tiny room, scrubbing her toilets, while she wears your clothes and spends your money. How can you even stand to look at her?" "I don't look at her as a sister anymore," I said. "I look at her as a target, and I'm almost done, Stellan." "How can I help?" he asked. The question was a shock. "I want out, Marlo. I want a divorce, but she's threatened to use her PR team to ruin my family's name if I leave her before the IPO. If I help you take her down. Can you get me out of the wreckage?" "I can," I said, stepping forward. "If you give me the access codes to the company's internal server, I can find the documents they used to frame me. I can prove the Larkin beauty accounts were doctored." Stellan didn't hesitate. He grabbed a piece of paper and wrote down the administrative password. The alliance was formed. With Stellan's access codes, I spent my nights in the library, logged into the Larkin Beauty corporate server. I wasn't looking for formulas anymore. I was looking for the paper trail. I found the hidden ledger, the one Holly's kept for the black expenses. It was filled with payments to private investigators, hush money for former factory workers, and most importantly, the digital footprint of the transfer Fallen had used to frame me. She had moved $50,000 from the company account to a personal account she had opened in my name using my social security number while I was asleep. She had done it from her own laptop, and the IP address was right here, in this penthouse. But I wasn't ready for the police yet. I wanted her to suffer publicly first. Using the server, I found the contact information for the FDA's Regional Compliance Office. I sent an anonymous tip from a throwaway email account. I attached photos I had taken of the unsanitary storage conditions in the warehouse, photos I had staged by pulling crates of expired, moldy product from the dumpster and stacking them in the active inventory room. The FDA didn't waste time. 3 days later, while Fallon was hosting a brunch for influencers, 3 federal agents arrived at the Larkin Beauty warehouse. They found the moldy product exactly where I said it would be. They shut down the entire warehouse for 30 days, pending a full investigation. The news hit the wires an hour later. Larkin Beauty warehouse closed over health risks, the headlines screamed. The company's stock dropped 15% in a single afternoon. Investors began to panic. The billionaire empire was starting to bleed, and I was the one holding the knife. Fallon was now convinced there was a corporate spy in her inner circle. She became a shell of her former self, consumed by a raging paranoia. She hired a high-end security team to sweep the Larkin offices for bugs every morning. She made every employee sign a new 20-page non-disclosure agreement. She never suspected the Maid. In Fallon's narrow, elitist mind, the help didn't have the brains to be a spy. To her, I was just a background character, like a lamp or a rug. She would scream into her phone right in front of me, revealing her darkest secrets while I mopped the floor at her feet. She called her VP of operations into the penthouse one evening. I watched from the hallway as she paced the room, waving a crystal glass of scotch. "It's you, isn't it?" she screamed at the man who had worked for her for 4 years. "You're the one talking to the FDA. You're the one who leaked the wet dog story." "Fallon, I've been loyal to you since the beginning," the man pleaded. "Liar," she shrieked. "You're fired, get out. I'll sue you until you're living in a cardboard box." She fired her entire marketing team the next day. The Larkin Beauty staff began to revolt, with 3 high-level executives quitting in protest. The company was in a state of total chaos. After everyone left, Fallon collapsed onto the sofa, shaking. I walked over and placed a cup of chamomile tea on the table next to her. "You are the only one loyal to me, Jane," she said, looking up at me with sunken, haggard eyes. "You're the only one who doesn't want something from me. Everyone else is a traitor. Everyone else wants to steal my crown." "I only want what's best for you, madam," I said, bowing my head. I felt a cold sense of satisfaction. She was right. I didn't want her crown. I wanted to melt it down. Holly's, our mother, was a shark, and like all sharks, she could smell blood in the water. She saw the sinking ship of Larkin Beauty, and she decided to save herself. I was in the garden, trimming the hedges near the gazebo, when I overheard Holly's on the phone. She didn't know I was there. "Sell my shares, Arthur," Holly's whispered into her phone. "All of them, every single one. Do it quietly in small blocks so the market doesn't notice a sell-off." There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. "I don't care if it's her company," Holly's snapped. "Fallon is cracking up. She's losing her mind and she's going to take my retirement with her. She's a fraud, Arthur. We both know it. The formulas were stolen, the success is a lie, and the FDA is only the beginning. I want out before the police arrive." I held my breath, my heart racing. Holly's was going to cash out and leave her own favorite daughter to rot. It was the ultimate betrayal. I had my phone recording in my pocket. I caught every word. Later that night, I went to the library and used the computer to print out a full transcript of the call. I waited until Fallon was in the shower, then I walked into her master bedroom and placed the transcript directly on her silk pillow. I wanted them to destroy each other. I wanted the 2 people who had ruined my life to see exactly what they were to each other. I slipped out of the room and waited for the explosion. The fight that broke out when Fallon found that transcript was legendary. It was the kind of screaming match that shook the walls of the penthouse. I stood in the corner of the dining room, holding a feather duster, watching the mother and daughter tear each other apart. "You're betting against me?" Fallon screamed, her voice cracking. She picked up a heavy marble vase and threw it at Holly's. It missed, shattering against the wall. "I made you rich, I gave you everything." "You didn't make anything," Holly's screamed back, her face red with fury. "You're nothing without Marlowe's brain. You're a fraud and a thief, and now you're a failure. I'm not going to jail for you, Fallon. I'm going to Saint-Tropez." "You helped me frame her," Fallon shrieked. "You were the one who suggested the embezzlement charge. If I go down, you go down with me." "Try it," Holly sneered. "I have the recordings of you planning the whole thing. I've been protecting myself from you since day one." They were exposing every secret, every crime, every lie. They were finally telling the truth, not out of honesty, but out of pure, concentrated hate. Stellan walked into the room and stood next to me. He didn't say a word. He just looked at the two women he had lived with and shared his life with, and I saw the last bit of respect for them die in his eyes. He looked at me and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. It was time for the endgame. The internal structure of the Larkin Empire had turned to dust. All I had to do now was blow on it. "Jane," Stellan said loudly, breaking the fight. "The madam needs her tea. She seems stressed." I bowed. "Yes, sir." The survival of Larkin Beauty now depended entirely on the launch of Eclipse. This was the revolutionary anti-aging cream that I had spent 3 years developing in secret before Fallon stole it. It was, quite simply, the greatest invention in the history of skincare. It could literally erase fine lines in minutes. The launch was to be a massive, live-streamed global event from the penthouse. The most influential press members, the biggest investors, and the top 5 influencers in the world were invited to sit in the living room while millions watched online. Fallon was a mess. She had lost 15 pounds, and her skin was sallow. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. She was relying on heavy doses of anti-anxiety medication just to function. "This has to be perfect, Jane," she told me on the morning of the launch. She was sitting in her makeup chair, her hands shaking so hard the artist could barely apply her eyeliner. "If Eclipse fails, I lose everything. The bank will seize the penthouse. The board will remove me as CEO." "It won't fail, madam," I said, smoothing her hair. "The world is going to see exactly who you are today. They are going to see your true face." I looked at her in the mirror. She smiled, thinking I was giving her a compliment. She had no idea that I was the one who had prepared the AV presentation. She had no idea that Stellan had given me the final pieces of the puzzle. "You've been a good servant, Jane," she said, her voice unusually soft. "Maybe after the launch I'll give you a bonus, or a week off." "That's very kind, madam," I said, "but I don't think I'll be needing a vacation." The night before the launch, I stayed up until 3:00 a.m. in the media room. Fallon had handed me a gold-plated USB drive. "This is the My Journey reel," she had told me. "It's a 20-minute video showing how I created the brand. I want it played right before I step onto the stage. It's supposed to be inspirational." I took the drive. In the privacy of the laundry room, I plugged it into my laptop. The video was a joke. Lots of slow-motion shots of Fallon looking at beakers and smiling at the camera while soft piano music played. I opened my editing software. I had a lot of material to work with. I spliced the video. I kept the inspirational opening, but after 2 minutes the music stopped. I inserted the confession, MP3, audio where Fallon admitted I was the genius. I added the recording of Holly's admitting the formulas were stolen. Then I added the footage from the hidden camera Stellan had helped me install in the lab. It showed Fallon screaming at her staff, throwing things, and most importantly, it showed her looking at the original journal she had stolen from me. I finished the compilation with a slow-motion close-up of my own prison release papers, showing the date and the charges. I saved the new file over her original one, using the exact same file name. I plugged the gold USB drive back into the media console. The bomb was armed. The timer was set. All I had to do was wait for the world to press play. The morning of the eclipse launch was electric. The penthouse was buzzing with people. Makeup artists, stylists, camera crews, and tech teams were everywhere. The living room had been transformed into a sleek, futuristic stage with white lighting and giant LED screens. Fallen sat in her chair, looking brittle and sharp. She was wearing a white suit that was supposed to make her look pure and scientific. "Jane," she called out, her voice echoing over the noise. "Bring me my lucky diamond earrings and some sparkling water, no tap water." I brought the earrings on a silver tray. I watched as she clipped them on. She looked at herself in the mirror, trying to summon the Queen of Beauty one last time. "You look beautiful, madam," I said, standing behind her. "The world won't be able to take their eyes off you." "Thank you," she said dismissively, checking her reflection. "After this launch is over, Jane, I'm firing you. I'm moving to a bigger estate and I need a proper French maid. Someone with class, not some plain girl from the city. You understand, don't you? You're just not on brand for me anymore." I didn't flinch. I didn't get angry. In fact, I felt a strange sense of peace. "I understand perfectly, madam. I'm glad you've decided it's time for a change." "Good," she said, standing up. "Now get out of the way, the show is starting." I walked toward the kitchen. As I passed Stellan, he squeezed my hand for a brief second. "Are you ready?" he whispered. "I've been ready for 5 years," I replied. The lights in the ballroom went down. The influencers in the front row raised their phones to record. The live stream counter on the screen showed 5 million viewers across the globe. Fallen stepped onto the stage. She was bathed in a brilliant white light. She looked perfect, at least from a distance. "Welcome to the birth of Eclipse," she purred into her headset microphone. Her voice was back to its smooth, manufactured silkiness. "This is not just a product. It is a revolution. It is a piece of my soul, born from years of dedication and sacrifice." She paused for dramatic effect, looking into the main camera. "Before I show you the power of Eclipse, I want to show you where it all began. I want to show you my truth." She signaled to the tech team at the back of the room. "Please, roll the video." I stood by the service entrance, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm. I watched as the giant LED screen behind her flickered to life. The video started as she expected. There were the shots of her in the dorm room, the soft piano music playing. Fallen smiled, looking humble. Then, at the 2-minute mark, the screen went black. The piano music cut out with a sharp, ugly screech. The silence in the room was deafening. Then, the audio of Fallen's drunk, slurred voice boomed through the high-end speaker system, loud enough to shake the windows. "Marlowe is the actual genius. I'm just the face. I can't even explain how the Larkin lift works. Why can't the face have a dress that stays on?" Fallen froze. She turned around, staring at the screen with wide, unblinking eyes. The crowd in the living room gasped. The influencers' phones were still recording, capturing every second of the disaster. On the screen, the video cut to a grainy shot of Holly's on her phone in the garden. "Fallen is a fraud, Arthur. We both know it. The formulas were stolen. I want out before the police arrive." Then came the final blow. The screen showed the hidden camera footage of Fallen in the lab. She was holding the black leather journal, my journal. She was laughing as she tore a page out. "I can't believe Marlowe left this behind," Fallen's voice said on the video. "She was always so stupidly sentimental. Now it's mine, all of it." The screen ended with a giant, high-resolution image of my prison mugshot, followed by the document showing Fallen had opened the embezzlement account from her own computer. "Turn it off," Fallen screamed, her voice cracking as she turned back to the audience. "Cut the feed, it's a hack, this is a deepfake." She ran toward the tech booth, but Stellan was standing in the doorway, the door locked from the inside. He looked at her with a calm, cold expression and shook his head. "The world is watching, Fallen," Stellan said, his voice carrying over the silence. 6 million people now. You wanted to show them your truth. Well, here it is." Fallen collapsed onto her knees in the center of the stage, the white lights making her look like a ghost. The investors were already standing up, shouting for their lawyers. The press was in a frenzy. The Larkin empire had vanished in 3 minutes of video. Fallon looked around the room, her eyes wild and searching for someone to blame. She saw the influencers recording her breakdown. She saw the investors sneering at her. "Who did this?" she shrieked, her voice echoing off the marble walls. "Who is doing this to me?" I walked out from the kitchen service door. I wasn't wearing the scratchy, oversized gray uniform anymore. I had stripped it off to reveal a sharp, tailored black suit I had hidden under my bed for weeks. I had taken off the thick, fake glasses. I had wiped the dull, sallow foundation off my face, revealing my clear, healthy skin. I walked slowly onto the stage, my heels clicking on the floor. The room went completely silent as I stood next to my sister. For the first time in 5 years, we were standing side by side. The resemblance was now undeniable. We looked like two sides of the same coin, one real, one a counterfeit. "Hello, Fallon," I said. My voice was amplified by the microphone still attached to her collar. Fallon gasped, stumbling back as if I had hit her. "Marlo, you were the maid all this time." "I cleaned your house, Fallon," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I scrubbed your floors and I listened to your lies. I watched you steal my life and wear it like a cheap coat. Now I'm here to clean up your mess." I turned to the cameras, looking directly into the lens. "My name is Marlo Larkin," I said to the 6 million people watching. "I am the scientist who created Larkin Beauty, and I have the journals to prove it." The police, who Stellan had called 20 minutes earlier, walked through the front door. The aftermath was a glorious, calculated destruction. Fallon and Hollies were arrested on the spot. They were charged with corporate fraud, embezzlement, grand larceny, and perjury. The black leather journal I had hidden in the cleaning closet became the key evidence that put them away. The Larkin Beauty stock crashed to zero. The company was headed for liquidation, but I was ready. With the help of Mr. Thayer, who was more than happy to invest once he saw the real genius behind the brand, I bought the assets of Larkin Beauty for pennies on the dollar at a bankruptcy auction. I bought the patents, the warehouse, and the penthouse. 3 months later, I stood on the balcony of the penthouse, my penthouse. The city lights stretched out before me like a carpet of diamonds. Stellan had divorced Fallon and moved to Europe. He was a free man, and we remained good friends. Hollies was in a minimum security prison, finally learning what it was like to live without silk sheets. Fallon was awaiting trial in a county jail, her queen of beauty image shattered forever. She was bankrupt, disgraced, and alone. I looked at the giant neon sign on the building across the street. It no longer said Larkin Beauty. It now said Phoenix Labs. I picked up a glass of expensive champagne from the table. I didn't need a maid to serve it to me. I poured it myself. I took a slow, cold sip. It tasted like justice. It tasted like victory. The maid was gone. The sister was gone. Only the scientist remained. I had sabotaged the empire from the inside and from the ashes. I had built something real. I smiled at my reflection in the glass. The house was finally clean.